Hi, my name is Ken Heidebrecht. My heart's desire here at Hanging on His Words is to spread the entirety of the gospel message to whoever will hear it, and to serve my Creator by helping people learn how to be obediently in covenant with Him. Hanging on His Words is a ministry that not only teaches others how to run this faith race, but does so through compelling video and musical content. If you are someone that has personally been blessed by my music or video teachings or both, please consider contributing to my efforts. My goals are to step up my music and video production value, and more importantly, to create content on a more frequent and full-time basis. This is where you, my patrons, can make this possible. Whether your support is financial or through prayers and encouragement, I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Honor of Kings. My name is Ken Heidebrecht. I'm the host of this channel where Honor of Kings is being hosted this season. And with me is my astute brother who's just incredible to dialogue with and is fun co-host with the show, Sean Griffin. How you doing, brother?
Hey, thanks for the warm intro, Ken. I'm doing great. It's good to see you again this week. And man, we're going to finish out a really fun book, Testament of Job.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been kind of going over this book the last couple of episodes, and it's definitely an eye-opener. There's some things in this book that I found very fascinating. I don't know about you, Sean, but it definitely elaborates a little bit more into the situations that Job found himself in the canonical book of Job that we don't really see, right? We don't get some extra details that maybe should perhaps be in that narrative that we don't get to see.
Yeah. There's it kind of reminds me of like First, Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles. Same events are being talked about, different details in each little account from a different perspective, if you will. So that's kind of what we're looking at with Testament of Job. Apparently, as we're going to see in the last chapter, apparently this was recorded down by his brother or his brother-in-law.
Yeah, his brother Nahor.
Yeah, his brother. So I guess he's given a perspective that the canonical book of Job did not give us.
Yeah, because we don't really know who wrote that book, do we? It doesn't really say who the author is.
Yeah. Well, at least before. I mean, if it wasn't someone in Job's clan or family, because clearly they would have known the story, it would have been passed over to the Israelites and then rescribed, recopied by Ezra in the 5th century BC. So we don't really know its original author. Like a lot of the books in the Bible. That's kind of something we talk about here on this show, right?
That's right, exactly. And for those who are new to the show and are maybe wondering if you're stumbling upon the show for the first time, what it is that we do here at Honor of Kings, Sean and I, we like to take books that have been either in a canon and been removed throughout time, or just simply hasn't been in a canon. We research the text, we study it, we most importantly study it against the canon 66 Bible that we have here in the Protestant Western versions that we're all familiar with. And we see what it is that it teaches theologically, doctrinally, does it line up? And we make an assessment kind of nearing the end of the episode as to whether or not, this book should have been removed. Was it a good idea? And, can we glean truth from it and perhaps use it to add to our apologetics? Because, as many of you know, that's a very important thing to use in your walk. And so this just adds, in my opinion, when we do these episodes, when we look over these books and we consider the content in them and the historicity of them, and does it add to the overall context of the storyline that all of us who are believers really, really should have a grasp on? And a lot of times it does. Sometimes it's, like if you've stuck around long enough, Sean and I have gone over books that, shouldn't have been in the canon. They weren't in the canon. So we understand why those were never put in. But there are other ones like this one that we're covering today and have the last couple episodes that we're just, what is it that this thing is teaching? And perhaps maybe it should be considered scripture. We'll find out by the end of this episode, because we're going to plan on covering the rest of the book. Right, Sean? Is that the plan?
Yeah, I think we can get through this today. Yeah.
Okay. So going to be a lot of reading, and we'll probably, cover a wide range of stuff, but there's only a few more chapters to go. And I think Sean and I are ready to kind of move on to another book to end off this season. So yeah, maybe we'll take some questions at the end too, if you're good with that, Sean.
Sure. Yeah, I'm always willing to do Q&As.
Cool. Before we get going, I'm just going to say hi to a few people in the chat. I see here Earl Rogers, J.R. Cleve, Shalom. Take Flight says, love Honor of Kings. Thank you. We appreciate that. Jason Kinney, Robert Daniels, Ann Mackenzie, Sister Sharon Marion, Windfeather, Sister Marcia. Shalom. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. Pepper Moon, Rolly R, Abril Zurath. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Who else we got in here? Eric Rice. Hey, brother. Shalom. Thanks for joining us this evening. So yeah, we always appreciate you guys joining us. It's fun, and I know that a lot of you have read a lot of these books that we've covered, and you have the same appreciation, that same desire to see what it is that they contain, and what we can do with these books. So yeah, we'll just get to it, I guess, John.
Yeah, I think the audience is starting to realize that our evaluation concept, since we don't have the actual conversation of the quote unquote councils of the 4th and the 5th to 16th century, where they had these biblical canon councils, we don't know the evaluation process they had to determine what book was valid and what wasn't, because there was multiple councils that had contradictory ideas of which books were valid. It wasn't we're talking like big books like Hebrews and Revelation and James. So this is to us, it's an honor to get to do this, to have the ability by the Father to actually look at these books, to have them at our disposal in the modern time. And I think the audience has been catching on here. It is season 3 that we obviously look for theology. We also try to look at history of the manuscripts, but that doesn't hold the biggest weight. I think the theology probably holds the bigger weight. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, because there could have been a book that somebody had claimed. A guy could have falsely written a book in the 3rd century BC, and then try to make it sound as Hebrew as possible. But if it teaches something different, well, then it fails the Deuteronomy 13 test.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's right, man. And Earl Rogers in the chat saying, I haven't read this book. Sounds interesting. It is a really interesting book. It's not that long of a read. I'd highly recommend you do pick it up and glean it, or just watch our last couple episodes and obviously stay tuned with this one. But it's a pretty fascinating. Yeah. West Blaze is in the chat too, brother. I gotta acknowledge him too. Shalom, brother. Thanks for joining us. All right, man. If you want, you can start reading, Sean.
Sure. Okay, so we have here in chapter 7 is where we left off last time. We'll pick back up here. And it says here in chapter 7, at this time the kings heard what happened to me. They rose and came to me. Ake from his land. I think there's a typo. Sorry about that. Okay. From his land to visit me and to comfort me. And when they came, it should say each from his land. Yeah. Verse 2 says, and when they came near me, they cried with a loud voice, and each tore his clothes. And after they had prostrated themselves, touching the earth with their heads, they sat down next to me for 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word. They were 4 in numbers: Eliphaz, the king of Teman, and Bilad, and Sophar, and Elihu. And when they had taken their seat, they conversed about what had happened to me. Now, when for the first time they had come to me, and I had shown them my precious stones, they were astonished and said, if of us 3 kings all our possessions would be brought together into one, it would not come up to the precious stones of Jobab's kingdom's crown. For you are a greater nobility than all the people of the east. And when, therefore, they now came to the land of Osisis, also called Uz, to visit me, they asked in the city, where's Jobab, the ruler of this whole land? And they told them concerning me, he sits upon the dunghill outside of the city, for he has not entered the city for 7 years. And then again they inquired concerning my possessions, and there was revealed to them all that happened to me. And when they had learned this, they went out of the city with the inhabitants, and my fellow citizens pointed me out to them. But these forcefully protested and said, surely this is not Jobab. And while they hesitated, there said Eliphaz, the king of Teman, come, let us step near and see. And when they came near, I remembered them, and I wept very much when I learned the purpose of their journey. And I threw earth upon my head, and while shaking my head, I revealed unto them that I was Job. And when they saw me shake my head, they threw themselves down upon the ground, all overcome with emotion. And while their hosts were standing around, I saw the 3 kings lie upon the ground for 3 hours like dead. Then they rose and said to each other, we cannot believe that this is Jobab. And finally, after they had for 7 days inquired after everything concerning me and searched for my flocks and other possessions, they said, Do we not know how many goods were sent by him to the cities and villages around about to be given to the poor, aside from all that was given away by him within his own house? How then could he have fallen in such a state of perdition and misery? And after the 7 days, Elihu said to the kings, Come, let us step near and examine him accurately, whether he truly is Jobab or not. And they, being not half a mile distance from his malodorous, I can't even forget, malodorous body odor,
Malodorous, yeah.
malodorous body odor, they rose and stepped near, carrying perfume in their hands, while their soldiers went with them, and threw fragrant incense round about them, so that they could come near me. And after they had thus passed 3 hours, covering the way with aroma, they drew close. And Eliphaz began. I mean, is that not?
What a scene, eh?
Well, you're right. That'd be hilarious. Be like a 6-hour movie. Just have this conversation. And are you he who once shone like the sun of day upon the whole earth? Are you he who once resembled the moon and the stars effulgent throughout the nights? I answered him and said, I am. And thereupon all wept and lamented. And they sang a royal song of lamentation, their whole army joining them in a chorus. And again Eliphaz said to me, Are you he who had ordered 7,000 sheep to be given for the clothing of the poor? Where then has gone the glory of your throne? Are you he who had ordered 3,000 cattle to do the plowing of the field for the poor? Where then has your glory gone? Are you he who had golden couches, and now you sit upon a dunghill? Where then has your glory gone? Are you he who had 60 tables set for the poor? Are you he who had censers for the fine perfume made of precious stones, and now you are in a malodorous state? Malodorous state, I can't even. Where then has your glory gone? Are you he who had golden candelabras set upon silver strands, and now you must long for the natural gleam of the moon? Where then has your glory gone? Are you the one who had an ointment made of the spices of frankincense, and now you are in a state of repulsiveness? Where then has your glory gone? Are you he who laughed the wrongdoers and sinners to scorn, and now you've become a laughingstock to all? Where then has your glory gone? And when Eliphaz had for a long time cried and lamented, while all the others joined him, so that the commotion was very great, I said to them, Be silent, I will show you my throne and the glory of its splendor. My glory will be everlasting. The whole world shall perish, and its glory shall vanish, and all those who hold fast to it will remain beneath. But my throne is in the upper world, and its glory and splendor will be to the right of the Savior in the heavens. My throne exists in the life of the holy ones, and its glory in the imperishable world. For rivers will be dried up, and their arrogance shall go down to the depth of the abyss. But the streams of my land, in which my throne is erected, shall not dry up, but shall remain unbroken in strength. The kings perish, and the rulers vanish, and their glory and pride is as the shadow in a looking glass. But my kingdom lasts forever and ever, and its glory and its beauty is in the chariot of my Father.
All right, man. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, that last bit's interesting, but let's just talk about some of the former stuff here. It's interesting that when they were so perplexed as to see Job, they couldn't even believe it, right? They're just like they had to go around scoping out everything around, like making sure, like, what the heck's really going on here? How can this be, right? And they corroborate, like, with his, the good deeds that he did, right? That he was known for, right? That he would feed the poor, and he would use a lot of his means to help the poor and the widow and the orphans and all that. Even though Satan tried to, convince people that he was a terrible person, right? To muster the army towards, taking advantage of this guy. But so that's corroborated. They all knew about it, about his charity and his goodwill and righteousness.
And that's one of my questions throughout this, as I was reading this, was the last few chapters, we did see that Satan impersonated a king of Persia, assembled some bad dudes to come and do all this bad stuff to Job. Has he been deposed from his kingship, or is he still king? And in some way, like with Nebuchadnezzar, he was deposed for 7 years, and I'm guessing Daniel took over for that time. So, because think about the practical daily responsibilities of being a king over a kingdom, And I'm just thinking, are they coming out to the dunghill and shouting, "Hey, what about the food for next quarter?" And he's shouting back,
"Sire,
yeah, tell the Arabians we need a better price." He's trying to. I mean, what is the reality here of him being out there? Because we know his wife is going out there to live with him every night.
Yeah, and she's working as a servant and trying to just bring about just the bare essentials of life so they can have bread to eat, right? Just to kind of live. And she's a servant under, I can't remember the guy's name, but they obviously, the people that they ruled over, the nation, they knew who these people were prior to this, obviously, right? But it
Yeah.
seems like they're not helping them out in any way. They're not really. It seems like they're fine with the state of how things are, and it's bizarre because like I said, like when Sittis, Job's wife, went into the market to get bread, I mean, they knew exactly who she was,
Yeah.
right? No one was out there being like, hey, my lady, like let us give you bread. You're our queen, right? Or like no one was coming forward to do any good righteous deeds for them. In fact, they were taking advantage of the situation when the Persians came, right? It says that his own people, were sitting on his golden couch and doing this and doing that and taking advantage of, his state of what he was enduring here. So it seems like in a way he still is ruling, but not. I don't know. Like it's weird. We don't see anyone else making any decisions. We don't. They obviously are looking for Job still, even though it's 7 years after the fact.
Right.
And so they still realize that this guy must still be king of this land in Uz. And yeah,
It's interesting. And they spend 7 days. Once they get there, they spend 7 days just trying to evaluate what they're looking at. It's
yeah,
pretty amazing. And it's hard for them to even believe it. And of course, the incredible pomp of them spritzing themselves with the perfume for 3 hours, just walking over to him, which is hilarious. Took him 3 hours to go half a mile.
yeah.
But so we got four very illustrious kings, and what I think is fascinating in this whole chapter, Ken, is that it keeps mentioning the word glory. Once the four kings realize that it is Jobab, it is Job, and they are in the right place, and they're talking to the right guy they were looking for, and that he's had all this misery and perdition that he's involved in, and he has been so long. They then start this rhetorical concept where they keep saying, "Are you the one who had all this?" And they start listing off these cool things. But he keeps saying, "Where has your glory gone? Where has your glory gone?" And then Job responds, which we can talk about his response, and which I think he's alluding to the resurrection
Yeah.
and the promise of the covenant. And but in both his response and in the dirge of disbelief by the fellow kings, they keep mentioning the glory and attributing to it physical value of gems and gold and wealth and opulence. And so it reminds me of every time we see in the scriptures where Yahweh says, "I will show them my glory." And it
Hmm.
usually has this reference of kingdom come.
Yeah.
And then when we get to Revelation 21, we see the kingdom being described in Revelation 21. Apparently it's decked out with, of course, even in Isaiah 54, it's talked about how it's decked out as well and with expensive materials.
Yeah.
So it just makes me wonder if that's the old, because I've always wondered what is this old school reference in the Bible when they keep talking about your glory,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this seems to be one of the uses of that word from the context.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah,
To me, I mean, in reference to Yahweh, to see his glory, I mean, I always thought that would be like just his like physical manifestation of who he is as God in his purest, brightest spiritual nature.
hmm
But I definitely agree that that's also alluding to, the physical kingdom in which he is king over. Um, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, well, think about it. Like, what if even if Yahweh is sitting on his throne, like in Revelation 4, sitting on what looked like green, you know, what was it, emerald? A
Emerald, yeah.
throne of, which is also a form of sapphire, by the way, for those who are not familiar with different types of rocks. And then behind him was this big rainbow and all this, and he's in that same scene we get described to us in the book of First Enoch, and it's like this amazing house with fire skirted around it, and
Hmm.
the floor is crystalline, and what I'm saying, it's like this amazing. It just looks like someone, just like he's blinging, like a ton of bling.
Oh yeah.
And it makes me think that in addition to his actual body and his actual radiance of his nature, everything about his habitation is also just as impressive.
Oh yeah.
Because he's God.
100%. 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, but yeah, it is interesting kind of what Job's response is in light of what we're saying here with regards to what he is going to be receiving, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he sets it apart, the timeline, or even just the tense rather, um, does foreshadow a future time that he's referring to, right? And these guys kind of take a little, they don't get the context, right? It seems like they don't understand the resurrection and the full outcome of what Job's glory will really
Yeah.
represent, right?
Yeah,
But
if you were Job, Ken, and I was one of these visiting kings from a different land, I came to see you and I saw this, and then you responded with, my glory will be everlasting. The whole world shall perish and its glory shall vanish. And my throne is in the upper world and its glory and splendor will be right to the right of the Savior in heavens. If you said that to me, I would instantly understand it. I'd just start smiling and be like, this dude's still got a good attitude. He remembers the hope of the covenant. You know what I mean?
yeah, right,
Like,
right,
he hasn't lost his faith. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Even though I'm sitting here full of sores and smell like poo, he hasn't lost his faith. Like, he's still trusting in God. So, like, I would know instantly these references,
yeah.
and so
Do we see,
it is
Sean?
curious.
Sorry. Yeah. Do we see anywhere in scripture a king kind of verbalizing this future glory for themselves with regards to the resurrection and them having a throne and even saying they're going to, have their throne sitting on the right of the Savior? Do we see that being asserted anywhere in the 66?
Only Yeshua in
Yeah.
Revelation, right?
Which makes it interesting because it's like the positions that people held who were in covenant here, such prestigious positions like Job, right, where he's king over this land, someone like David, um, are they going to be kings? Are they also going to be because we're referred to as kings and priests, right?
Yeah.
In the resurrection. So it's like, is that strictly what he's referring to? Um, Knowing that he's going to have this same type of like authority over a resurrected people or even over the mortals that are still alive during the millennial reign. What do you think the implications of this really is?
Yes, I think that this phrase right here we see in verse 36. It says, and it talking about his throne is in the upper world. Its glory and splendor will be the right of the Savior in the heavens. We actually had someone in the audience ask about that as well. I think it was Miss Marcia. And so to me, I understand this to be the cultural idiom of kingdomship that all of them back in the day would have understood. If you're at the right hand of the person in charge, then you're under his authority and you're his servant, right? So two examples, I guess. One's to flesh out the idea further. You remember when James and John of Zebedee, their mother, came and asked Jesus, "Hey, when you come to your kingdom, can my son sit at your right and your left?" And then he's like, "That's not for me to give." You know what I mean? But then later in Revelation 2, he says, "He who overcomes, I'll grant him the right to sit on my throne, just as I overcame and sat on my Father's throne."
Mm-hmm.
So that's the inference I think that is being mentioned here with Job, is he understands that the resurrection, he will be sitting with the Son of Man, the elect one, the Messiah, in a position of authority, but he'll be at his right hand, which is still in submission to him. Just like in Hebrews 1 and 10, we see that Yeshua is referred to as someone that is at the right hand of the Father. And we know, because we're not Trinitarians, we know that Yeshua is in submission to the Father, even in heaven, as 1 Corinthians 15, 24 through 28 expounds.
Right. Yeah. And I can't remember, Sean, but it's in either Second Esdras or Second Baruch where it talks about not necessarily they're going to be kings in rulership or anything like that in the millennial reign, but it does mention that when they wake up from the dead, I think and then it lists like Adam, Seth, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jonah. It lists a bunch of people will be lords over you or something like that. I wanted to find that before
It's in
getting
the
on here.
Testament. Yeah, it's in the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, and I can't remember if it's in Judah or Zebulun. I can't remember which one, but
And it
yeah.
lists all the patriarchs off. Yeah.
Yeah, it lists a whole bunch of OGs.
Very cool. So yes, so we're getting obvious kingdom, millennial reign, first resurrection, new covenant, verbiage here, which is awesome. I love seeing it because it proves that it was known way back.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, and for those of you who haven't seen episode 1, even please go back and watch it, review the manuscript history. But even if you don't believe this was actually written by Job's brother, as the last chapter will claim, and you just want to think that that it was pseudepigraphal, that someone else wrote it, first century BC, that means that person that wrote it also understood the promise of the covenant, the resurrection, the Messiah, all that. So by the time we get to Yeshua interacting with the Pharisees, there's a lot of bad doctrine. There's a lot of confusion. Yeshua is reprimanding Nicodemus in John 3 for not understanding the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
They've got theological issues. This is why I've continually tried to talk about how Yeshua, the prophecy of Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 9, is talking that is quoted in Matthew chapter 3, I believe, is that Yeshua went to a land of darkness. He was the light that went to a land of darkness, and that's talking about spiritual darkness. They had bad theology, So whoever wrote this, whether first century BC or who knows, 12th century BC, I don't know. They absolutely knew the entire story of the kingdom of God, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, amen. I agree. We can jump to the next one if you want. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up, or
no? Just I think that hopefully everyone I just love he's talking about the kingdom when he talks about rivers will not be dried up and the strength of it shall not be broken. I just think it's fascinating because we see Isaiah also talk about the kingdom with many rivers, and Ezekiel just expounds on the river of life and Revelation. Yeah, it's just really cool. Really cool.
Sean, what about and its glory and beauty is in the chariot of my father? What is that? Do you know anything about that? What that the whole chariot of my father thing, like what that means?
I don't know what the chariot passage refers to.
No. Okay. Interesting. All right.
You want this one?
Yeah, I got this. Yeah.
Okay.
When I spoke this to them, Eliphaz became angry and said to the other friends, "For what purpose is it that we have come here with our hosts to comfort him? Behold, he upbraids us. Therefore, let us return to our countries. This man sits here in misery, worm-eaten amidst an unbearable state of putrefaction. And yet he challenges it, saying, 'Kingdoms shall perish, and their rulers, but my kingdom, says he, shall last forever.' Eliphaz then rose in great commotion, and turning away from them in great fury, said, 'I go from here. We have indeed come to comfort him, but he declares war to us in view of our armies.' But then Baldad seized him by the hand and said, 'You shouldn't speak that to an afflicted man, and especially to one stricken down with so many plagues. Behold, we, being in good health, dared not approach him on account of the offensive odor, except with the help of plenty of fragrant aroma. But you, Eliphaz, are forgetful of all this. Let me speak plainly. Let us be magnanimous and learn what is the cause. Must he, in remembering his former days of happiness, not become mad in his mind? Who should not be altogether perplexed, seeing himself like this, lapsed into misfortune and plagues? But let me step near him, that I may find by what cause is he like this.' And Baldad rose and approached me, saying, 'Are you Job?' And he said, 'Is your heart still in good keeping?' And I said, 'I did not hold fast to the earthly things, since the earth with all that inhabit it is unstable. But my heart holds fast to the heaven, because there is no trouble in heaven.' Then Baldad rejoined and said, 'We know that the earth is unstable, for it changes according to season. At times it is in a state of peace, and at times it is in a state of war. But of the heaven, we hear that it is perfectly steady. But are you truly in a state of calmness? Therefore, let me ask and speak. And when you answer me to my first word, I shall have a second question to ask. And if again you answer in well-set words, it will be manifest that your heart has not been unbalanced.' And I said, 'Upon what do you set your hope?' Sorry, it should say, and he said, 'Upon what do you set your hope?' And I said, 'Upon the living God.' And he said to me, 'Who deprived you of all you did possess? And who inflicted you with these plagues?' And I said, 'God.' And he said, 'If you still place your hope upon God, how can he do wrong in judgment, having brought upon these plagues and misfortunes, and having taken from you all your possessions? And since he has taken these, it is clear that he has given you nothing. No king will disgrace his soldier who has served him well as bodyguard.' And I answered, saying, 'Who understands the depths of the Lord and of his wisdom to be able to accuse God of injustice?' And Baldad said, 'Answer me this, Job. Again, I say to you, if you are in a state of calm reason, teach me if you have wisdom. Why do we see the sun rise in the east and set in the west? And again, when rising in the morning, we find him rise in the east. Tell me your thought about this.' Then said I, 'Why should I babble forth the mighty mysteries of God? And should my mouth stumble in revealing things belonging to the Master? Never. Who are we that we should pry into matters concerning the upper world, while we are only of flesh, nay, earth and ashes? In order that you know that my heart is sound, hear what I ask you. Through the stomach comes food, and water you drink through the mouth, and then it flows through the same throat. And when the two go down to become excrement, they again part. Who effects this separation?' And Baldad said, 'I do not know.' And I continued and said to him, if you do not understand even the exits of the body, how can you understand the celestial circuits? Then Sophar rejoined and said, we do not inquire after our own affairs, but we desire to know whether you are in a sound state. And behold, we see that your reason has not been shaken. What now do you wish that we should do for you? Behold, we have come here and brought the physicians of 3 kings, and if you wish, you may be cured by them. But I answered and said, my cure and my restoration comes from God, the maker of physicians. Bam. Amen, Job.
Amen. Did you catch that BC biblical cosmology burn?
Yes, I did.
He's like, you don't know how the stomach works and makes poop. I'm even gonna tell you about the heavenly circuits. He's like,
yeah, exactly. The celestial circuits.
That's hilarious. Hilarious. That'll meme right there.
So Sean, I get why they're asking this stuff. I mean,
His
to me,
first answer was kind of off.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're testing his sanity.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had my own family at times when I was in Bible college, and I was just like jacked up on like zeal with no direction, right? Just jacked up on the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Just all I did was wanted to worship God, read the Bible, talk to people, but I've quickly learned that nobody else wants to do that. So, but my family thought I was not right in the head. Some of my family. Now, and so then I had some of my family talk to my dad and be like, "Hey, is Sean okay? Like he seems like his head's kind of in the clouds. Like he's not really, thinking. He's not really normal." And my dad talked to me about it, and I was like, I just wanted to have Bible study, and I was trying to get people together for Bible study, and that was too much zeal for them. So, yeah, it was funny. My dad just smiled after I explained it to him. He's like, "Good job, keep at it."
That's awesome.
So I understand too that he didn't really answer very rationally, right? He didn't really go through the normal pleasantries of, hey guys, how you been? How's your kingdoms? How's your flocks? How's your taxation rate? Any rebellions lately? He's not going through the normal stuff. He's just the first thing they're like, oh, is this Job? What happened to all your wealth and opulence and glory? And he's just like, my kingdom's in heaven, sitting there smelling like poo.
Just straightforward to the point with his responses. I mean, it's good. And it's, Sean, 1 second. I'm just going to get off camera here for a sec. 1 second.
It's okay. So yeah, that's what I saw about, or at least what I thought was really interesting about this passage was, he then has to go through and prove himself that, hey, I'm sane, I'm okay. I've been inflicted with plague for 7 years, but other than that, hey guys, I'm still in my right mind. And I think it's like verse 9. He says, okay, so this is who's asking him this?
Is it
Eliphaz? Yeah, Eliphaz. He says in verse 11, but if you truly are in a state of calmness, therefore let me ask and speak when you answer to me my first word. So he's like, if you answer my first question well, then I'll ask you another one. So he's like belittling him after he's already accused God of injustice, or right before he accuses God of injustice.
Yeah.
And so he's clearly not got the best attitude right now, in my opinion. And then Job has to come in and defend God and then start schooling this dude. And I just think that this is just such a fascinating, someone that amateur writer, and I love dialogue and I love interactions, and I've seen like where people are sitting in this occasion and like who's standing and what kind of reactions they're having. And, I'm like trying to envision the movie that would be this conversation. This is a fascinating conversation because Job looks like he's the underdog, but actually he's their superior.
Oh yeah,
which
big time.
Which would make sense. I mean, didn't they say when they showed up that your crown is greater than all of our three put together? Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So in verse 14, when Eliphaz is saying, if you still place your hope upon God, how can he do wrong in judgment, having brought upon you these plagues and misfortunes? Because Job just said God did this. He straight up says God, right? Which is fascinating that Job, I mean, when we read the canonical book of Job, right, we are to assume that Yahweh allowed Satan to do this, right? Mm-hmm. Same with this book. We see that Yahweh allows Satan, even after Job finds out that this temple that is in his kingdom has an idol in it that people are worshiping and doing homage to, and he wants to destroy it. But we get a different kind of scenario with regards to Satan's disposition towards him. He's not just trying to pick on him randomly, right? Here he has a purpose. You destroyed an idol in a temple that was dedicated to me. Now I have a personal vendetta against you. The angel tells him that this is going to happen if you do this. If you destroy it, Satan's going to wage war against you, and you're going to have to wrestle like a wrestler. You're going to have to fight him. And so it's just interesting to me that Job, while being questioned, and he's on trial here in front of his buddies, fellow kings, that he's just straight up says, God did this. Instead of saying, this is the circumstances surrounding why I'm sitting on a dunghill here 7 years later, you guys are approaching me all, bewildered by what you're seeing. It just fascinates me that's the only information that he provides with his answer here, right? And then Eliphaz's response to this is interesting because he's just like, essentially, no king will disgrace his soldier who has served him well as bodyguard. Therefore, you must have not have been a good servant as a bodyguard, right? Obviously, you've done something that this king would do this, that Yahweh would do this to you, which is interesting because clearly that's not the case here. He's been super faithful.
Yeah. And again, going back to chapter 1, the angel warned him this would happen. So it's, I don't remember if he actually told him it would be 7 years.
No, he didn't give a timeline, I don't think.
He didn't give a timeline, but he did say he would go through this. And that, so I guess just knowing that the Father told him, you will go through, the attacks of the enemy, but then I'll give you a double portion after that and I'll bless you. So it's like Job does have a light at the end of the tunnel. He does have the backstory that, like you're saying, he's not explaining to his friends. And I would, this is just me, right? The text doesn't say this, but if I'm in this position, I could easily see why Job doesn't take the effort to explain the backstory to his friends right now, because just like when my wife tells me, she asks me like, "Hey, are you going to do a Q&A?" And I'll be like, "No, I'm too tired." And she doesn't really ask much after that, but if she would, then I would be like, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm not. My conversation is not patient and long suffering, and there's no niceties. It's just straight and to the point. Like if I'm really tired and haven't got enough sleep, or if I was under plague for 7 years sitting in a dunghill and without any comforts of the world, I probably wouldn't have a lot of extra fluffy conversation for them either.
Yeah, that's true.
I would just be like straight to the point with, this happened, God did it. Okay, yeah, I'm here, but I'm going to be resurrected and have a glory in heaven. I'm not worried about it. You know what I'm saying? Because in his mind, he's already had to like console himself to the fact that this will pass. The Father said he's going to give me a double portion. Now I got to answer for all this nonsense that these guys won't understand anyway, because they don't even understand the covenant as much as he does, and they clearly don't have the wisdom that he does about life, which is why he starts schooling them on anatomy. Hey, by the way, did you notice? Does this remind you of Mark 7?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. When I first read it, I thought, because I come at these books with a bit of a raised brow, right? Like I'm not going to I give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Innocent until proven guilty, but it sounded anachronistic to me where they were pulling like a Mark 7-ish Yeshua's response to the Pharisees with the whole eating with unwashed hands scenario that they're in that chapter to this, and it sounds very, very reminiscent of it. So if I'm like a first century person who's just writing up a book like this and who knows about Yeshua and possibly has the the words of the Messiah in that first century to kind of add in to make it seem like it's legitimate, that's how I would do it too. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that was the first kind of like, I don't know, maybe not feeling I had with that. But okay. I don't know if are you trying to draw a parallel to that in a different way, or?
Well, no, I didn't think that it was, I wasn't thinking about it like you were. I was just thinking about Solomon and how, when he explained to the Queen of Sheba about all of life, including zoology and even insect world, where he starts explaining the ants to her and just different, like it seems like the ancient kings had some sort of academy or some sort of schooling in what they considered wisdom. And because like the other kings, they did bring their physicians with them and said that he could be cured if he wanted to be. And so if Jobab was also a great king. It's reason to believe he would have his own physicians who had taught him about basic anatomy. We're talking, by the way, about a culture that's living right next to, well, all of Babylon did this. Even ancient India did this. They would remove their organs and then they would mummify the body and then the organs separately. So they had some sort of sense of physiology
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
anatomy,
Yeah.
way back then.
Yeah.
It is an interesting statement because it does seem to line up so interestingly with Yeshua, just so matter of fact. And if Yeshua's, when in Mark 7, he's not really challenging the Pharisees on it. He's just explaining, that if whether you wash your hands or not doesn't matter, because what you eat goes in the body to purify it as it comes out. I know he did not declare all foods clean. That is an insertion by the text, guys. He would have nullified himself as a Messiah. Whoever was the translator that inserted that should lose his job. So this is interesting, though, because he does use this anatomy style teaching to best his friends and make them realize, to get them to admit that they're kind of accusing their senior.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. I mean, that kind of parallels with what he says in verse 20, where it's like, who are we that we should pry into matters concerning the upper world while we were only of flesh, nay, earth and ashes? I mean, to me, it just screams like men can speculate all they want. They can't get past the firmament, right? And there's only been a handful of people that have been taken up either in a vision or in spirit, as it's referred to in the book of Enoch and other places, where they've been able to even see that, and then they pen it down for us to try to picture how that is, right? But no one has been there, right? And this is why this is cool, and how Job's presenting this is just like, if you don't even know how this works, where you have one of these, what I'm describing, everyone does, and you don't know how that works, how are you going to know the celestial circuits? You're asking me about why does the sun rise in the east, set in the west type thing, and do the same thing over and over again, and how does it do that? You're not going to get, how can we know that? There's no way. We can't get past the firmament, right? So that's not our upper world yet.
Yeah, it's funny because this verse, I'm glad you mentioned this. Verse 20 also reminds me of 1 Corinthians 15. It's kind of like a similitude to Paul trying to express in verses 39 through 46, I believe, of 1 Corinthians 15, that, there's only two natures, right? There's the spiritual and there's the earthy. And the spiritual live above. The earthy is, the spiritual came first, the earthy comes second. And of course, he's using that information about creation as an example to lead up to resurrection stuff and teachings. But Job here is just kind of expressing to these guys, like, hey, man, there's some things that they know about in heaven we just don't know about. I mean, isn't this what First Enoch talks about in chapter 9, that the watchers taught men secrets of heaven they were striving to learn?
Yeah.
So there is definitely some extra information up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing. And I love verse 23. I know we just kind of mentioned it, but celestial circuits, that's another, that lines up perfectly with Psalm 19:7, or Psalm 19, 4-6. The sun moves in its circuits.
Yeah.
The sun is a celestial body that moves in its circuits. Also in First Enoch, chapter 72-82, the sun and moon move in celestial circuits in the sky, and through the circumference of the heaven. So this is proper biblical cosmology as well.
Absolutely. I like verse 26. My cure and my restoration comes from God, the maker of physicians. I mean, it's so, as you were saying, I mean, they may have been able to, remedy his issue, his malady there, but ultimately he knows that he's promised to get out of this trial that he's in, and even still looking forward to the resurrection, right? And that's ultimately what he's saying here, is my restoration comes from God, the maker of physicians. Like, my cure ultimately is going to be the first resurrection, which is amazing. It's so good.
Hey, you think those physicians back in the day with Job and his friends, do you think that they took the Hippocratic Oath?
Yeah. Way before Hippocrates. Yeah.
Did you see Wes Blaze and I cover that in our last Uncommon Ground?
I haven't seen the last episode. Sorry, guys. I haven't seen it yet, but
it's okay, man. We actually talked about, Wes had found that the Hippocratic Oath, if you read the whole thing, they actually swear an allegiance, or I swear that the information they're learning, the oath they're taking, they swear it to Apollo and all the other Greek gods.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Straight up a cult. It's wild, man. Well, yeah, I think these guys were good. I just, last thing I want to say about this, the armies of the kings joined in this song of lamentation,
Yeah,
like a choir. Like, so how many people are here? You know, like this, how many are at this scene at the dunghill? Like they all went out to the local trash heap to go sing. It's just kind of, it just seems like a really, really fascinating scene here.
very much. Yeah. It's hard to picture that how many men were there, and obviously they were further back. They didn't go in with the three kings. They
Yeah.
were likely just hanging back, but yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Do you want me to take the next one, or you have anything else on that chapter?
No, I think we should keep going if we're going to try to get through this. Yeah.
All right, chapter 9. And when I spoke this to them, behold, there my wife Sittis came running, dressed in rags, from the service of the master by whom she was employed as slave, though she had been forbidden to leave, lest the kings, on seeing her, might take her as captive. And when she came, she threw herself prostrate to their feet, crying and saying, "Remember, Eliphaz, and you other friends, what I was once with you, and how I have changed, how I am now dressed to meet you." Then the kings broke forth in great weeping, and being in double perplexity, they kept silent. But Eliphaz took his purple mantle and cast it about her to wrap herself up with it. But she asked him, saying, "I ask as favor of you, my lords, that you order your soldiers that they should dig among the ruins of our house which fell upon my children, so that their bones could be brought in a perfect state to the tombs. For as we have, owing to our misfortune, no power at all, and so we may at least see their bones. For have I, like a brute, the mother feeling of wild beasts, that my 10 children should have perished on one day, and not to one of them could I give a decent burial?" And the kings gave order that the ruins of my house should be dug up. But I prohibited it, saying, "Do not go to the trouble in vain, for my children will not be found, for they are in the keeping of their maker and ruler." And the kings answered and said, "Who will deny that he is out of his mind and raves? For while we desire to bring the bones of his children back, he forbids us to do so, saying they've been taken and placed the keeping of their maker. Therefore, prove unto us the truth." But I said to them, "Raise me that I may stand up." And they lifted me, holding up my arms from both sides. Then I stood upright and pronounced first the praise of God, and after the prayer I said to them, "Look with your eyes to the east." And they looked and saw my children with crowns near the glory of the King, the ruler of heaven. And when my wife Sittis saw this, she fell to the ground and prostrated herself before God, saying, "Now I know that my memory remains with the Lord." And after she had spoken this, and in the evening came, she went to the city, back to the master whom she served as slave, and lay herself down at the manger of the cattle, and died there from exhaustion of her proper tomb. And when her despotic master searched for her and did not find her, he came to the fold of his herds, and there he saw her stretched out upon the manger dead, while all the animals around her were crying about her. And all who saw her wept and lamented, and the cry extended throughout the whole city. And the people brought her down and wrapped her up and buried her by the house which had fallen upon her children. And the poor of the city made a great mourning for her, and said, "Behold, this Sittis, whose like in nobility and glory is not found in any woman. Alas, she was not found worthy of a proper tomb. The dirge for her you will find in the record."
What record's that?
Yeah, I don't know, right?
There's a couple records that we don't really know about, do we here?
That's right.
Okay, interesting. So, Sittis. First of all, we get the name of Job's wife in this book, as we mentioned last episode. We don't get that in the canon of 66. She's a good woman. She seems to be a very good woman, you know?
Yeah. I mean, just like us all, she had her moments. Those moments were recorded so briefly in the canon book of Job that it could lead people to think she wasn't a good woman.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to, before I got a hold of this book, Sean, I used to think she was kind of like a Jezebel, you know, just curse God and die, right? Like just evil, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess Job actually married someone who was worth being a helpmate with him. That was a good woman.
And apparently for 7 years she worked to bring Job food. And then and apparently she found herself working for this horrible employer. I thought it was funny that it said that the employer didn't want her. Yeah, he was despotic, but he didn't want her to go to the kings that came to visit Job, because he was like, "Oh, they're just going to take her from me," because he knew that the kings would recognize who she was, right, and get her out of her bad state. And he wanted to keep her as because he's a bad master. So yeah, that's and by the way, guys, we're not talking like American slave language or even slavery from the 1500s in our modern society or in modernity. That word is for a servant. And yeah, he was despotic, but it's not talking about, he didn't force her. Just as we read earlier, every night she came back to Job and brought him food, stayed with him. I mean, she wasn't like sold into slavery and now owned by somebody else. This was the terminology that came through the KJV in the 1500s. It used to be a terminology for being employed. Okay, so that's actually what it says right here. And she was in basically, if you translated this word slave properly in verse 1, it should say servant, right? He's
Mhm.
employed as a servant, and because the modern definition of slave, people doesn't. You're not employed. You're forcibly working for someone for no money. So that wasn't the case. She was getting paid. She was employed. This is just old school language of how they referred to a job.
Yeah, although he didn't want her to leave, though, right?
Right. Hey,
He
I've had
was.
jobs like that where people were like, "No, you can't have off on Thanksgiving," So they want me to go see my family. So yeah, I've had despotic rulers too.
Sean, verse 3, where it says, "Then the kings broke forth." Okay, so this is the first time they're seeing Job's wife, by the way, right? At like in this state, they're just coming to the realization that this might actually be Job who they're corresponding with here. They're slowly being convinced, and then all of a sudden Sittis comes, right?
That's right.
And she's just like, "Hey, remember me?" And then the kings broke forth in great weeping and being in double perplexity. So now they're like perplexed, obviously, with Job's circumstances, but now they're Sittis. Oh, okay. And they kept silent because now I think it clued in that this is Job, this is his wife. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
My first question would be, how in the world is this the first time they're hearing about this after 7 years? Obviously, they didn't have the internet, but they did have messengers that ran between kingdoms and passed on, reports, instructions, trade deals, and even gossip and rumors, right? Reports about the land. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think we see why they didn't know about it, because later when she tries to get their soldiers to dig up the bodies of her children, and Job's like, "No, don't worry about it." Like, I think this is what we talked about last time with the difference in attitude between his wife and him, and like she understands that he seems to have an attitude where he's going to endure this because he's been promised by the Father, after this I'm going to double bless you double again. This won't be the end of your life, and you'll get through this. But it's like she doesn't quite believe that, right? It's like
Hmm.
she's in despair because of her conditions, and now she's literally the breadwinner for the family at this point. So, but same thing with these other, like, you see that attitude come out, like, "No, don't worry about it." Like, the resurrection, they're with the Father. It's okay. And by the way, I guess we should talk about that, right?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know when I first read this, I thought was, oh man, is this like a fifth century, concept here where everyone
Hmm.
suddenly was going to heaven, and all the furthering new gospels that popped up in the fourth and fifth century.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean,
So
okay, so we have in verse 8 here, Job saying that essentially once Sittis is petitioning these kings to go and get the sons out of the ruin of the house that fell upon them. He's saying, don't go to the trouble in vain, for my children will not be found, for they are in the keeping of their maker and ruler. And that's not a troubling statement to me. I mean,
nope,
that to
Sheol.
me,
That's
that's
yeah, that's the way
Sheol,
it
right?
goes. Yep.
Um, I guess what is it,
Well, in
verse?
furthering chapters, he's actually going to explain this. In my opinion, this is why I'm glad we're reading all these chapters today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he raises them up, or sorry, he gets them to raise him up, right? And
Mhm.
what are I seeing a vision here now? They must be
Yeah,
right.
that's what I'm thinking it is. Just like Isaiah would see a vision of the future, of things to come, all the saints being resurrected and in heaven glorified with the robes on. Same thing here. But the Father's just allowing them, his wife, and these fellow kings to see the vision too.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, and they're seeing the sons in a resurrected
yeah,
glory, and it's enough for Sidis. She was happy, right? She saw
yeah.
it, and now I know that my memory remains with the Lord, and then she goes and dies, and has animals weeping over her.
And when something that you and I haven't even talked about previously is, in this vision, think about what it's saying in verse 13. Um, Sitting next to the king, the glory of the king, the ruler of heaven. Who is that?
Yeah, Yeshua.
Right. So if they're seeing the moment in the future where his sons, all of his children, seven sons, three daughters, get resurrected and are with the king of heaven, that means they're seeing the king of heaven in the future at that time too, which would be Yeshua.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So now this puts us in a category of like Enoch's visions of the Messiah being glorified and at the right hand of the Father after the resurrection.
Hmm.
So this
It's
is
pretty
pretty
amazing.
powerful.
It is a mind warp though, isn't it, Sean? If you actually sit back and think about the fact that this vision that was shown to them, they're seeing a future experience of their sons being in resurrected glory with Yeshua, but it hasn't even happened yet. But
That's
they're
right.
seeing it. That's just, to me, that's just fascinating how this whole, Yahweh knows the end from the beginning from the end, and he can show visions of things that are to come before they come. And it's just, to me, it's such a bizarre mind warp of a truth. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, John in Revelation sees the kingdom of God descending through the firmament down to
Yeah.
heaven or down to the earth. And that's a huge event, so yeah, it's just the whole idea of seeing the future, or the Father showing you the future in a vision. It's just like, I'm a little jealous, but then at the same time, I'm like, what responsibility comes with that kind of vision? And
Yeah.
here we have Job, like for him to have that kind of confidence, to be like going through all this, having this faith in God, and being like, hang on, guys, let me, like I said before, he's not really explaining very well. So then he's
Yeah.
like, hang on, guys, just raise me up and I'll explain. So they like lift him up off the poo, and then he's just sitting there, and then he's now prays, and then I'm guessing he prayed, Father, please open their eyes and show them a vision of the truth of the fulfillment of the covenant for my children. And then they turn around and they see this, and it reminds me of what was it, Elijah in First Kings chapter 6 with the king, and he's like, open your eyes and look at the armies of heaven all
Yeah.
around the mountains.
Yeah.
So it's very similar. I mean, we see similarities in how the Father works through faithful people with
Mhm.
visions. I don't see anything out of the ordinary there. I just hope the reader and the listener today understands that, in my opinion, his sons aren't already resurrected, because he knows the covenant, just like he was explaining earlier, right?
Yeah.
He was expounding upon the covenant, which includes the timing of the resurrection happening later. He knows that he's just pacifying the people at this moment, that he's not crazy by asking the Father to show his wife and the other kings the same vision, apparently, that he's already been shown, which that his children are okay,
Yeah.
that they're going to be in the resurrection. So that's
Yeah.
how he's so
It's
laid
amazing.
back about this.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
Just laying back in the poo, just lay back.
The noxious poo fumes that are, making him hallucinate possibly here.
Yeah.
Some would say, I'm sure, but
You think the perfume assistants are still standing in the background, just occasionally just psh, 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 psh,
yeah,
psh.
they're just like, I can just see them standing like 30 feet away with these long tubular things just squirting and like, ugh.
Yeah, this would be a hilarious SNL skit right here. Just occasionally you see it, just it'd be hilarious. Anyway, what else in this chapter?
Okay, so we have her death, right? The death of Job's wife.
Animals do cry, by the way. I've seen dogs do it.
Yeah. I think that's probably it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to.
No, that's it. I can take the next one.
Yeah, do it.
All right. Verse 1 of chapter 10, it says, But Eliphaz and those that were with him were astonished at these things. And they sat down with me, and replying to me, they spoke in boastful words concerning me for 27 days. They repeated again and again that I suffered deserving this for having committed many sins, and that there was no hope left for me. But I retorted to these men in zest of contention myself, and they rose in anger, ready to part in wrathful spirit. But Elihu conjured them to stay yet a little while, until he would have shown them what it was. For, said he, so many days did you pass, allowing Job to boast that he is just, but I shall no longer suffer it. For from the beginning did I continue crying over him, remembering his former happiness. But now he speaks boastfully, and in overbearing pride he says that he has his throne in the heavens. Therefore hear me, and I will tell you what is the cause of his destiny. Then, imbued with the spirit of Satan, Elihu spoke harsh words, which are written down in the records left of Elihu. And after he had ended, God appeared to me in a storm, and in clouds, and spoke, blaming Elihu, and showing me that he who had spoken was not a man, but a wild beast. And when God had finished speaking to me, the Lord spoke to Eliphaz, You and your friends have sinned, and that you have not spoken the truth concerning my servant Job. Therefore, rise up and make him bring a sin offering for you, in order that your sins may be forgiven. For were it not for him, I would have destroyed you. And so they brought to me all that belonged to a sacrifice, and I took it and brought it for them a sin offering. And the Lord received it favorably and forgave them their wrong. Then when Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sophar saw that God had graciously pardoned their sin through his servant Job, but that he did not deign to pardon Elihu, then did Eliphaz begin to sing a hymn, while the others responded. Their soldiers also joined while standing by the altar. Oh, so they've got an altar too.
Mm-hmm.
13, and Eliphaz spoke, Taken off is the sin, and our injustice gone. But Elihu the evil one shall have no remembrance among the living. His luminary is extinguished and has lost its light. The glory of his lamp will announce itself for him, for he is the son of darkness and not of light. The doorkeepers of the place of darkness shall give him their glory and beauty as share. His kingdom has vanished, his throne is smoldered. His throne has moldered, and the honor of his statue is in Hades. For he has loved the beauty of the serpent and the scales of the dragon. His gall and his venom belongs to the northern one, Zephuni, the adder. For he did not own himself unto the Lord, nor did he fear him, but he hated those whom he had chosen. Thus God forgot him, and the holy ones forsook him. His wrath and anger shall be unto him desolation, and he will have no mercy in his heart, nor peace, because he had the venom of an adder on his tongue. Righteousness is the Lord, and his judgments are true. With him there is no preference of person, for he judges all alike. Behold, the Lord comes. Behold, the holy ones have been prepared. The crowns and the prizes of the victors precede them. Let the saints rejoice, and let their hearts exult in gladness, for they shall receive the glory which is in store for them. And the chorus sang, our sins are forgiven, our justice has been cleansed. But Eliyahu, they put him in the song, bro.
I know.
Man, this is like a strange diss track on Elihu. But Elihu has no remembrance among the living. After Eliphaz had finished the hymn, we rose. I mean, he was in the chorus even. You know, they repeat the chorus usually a few times. That's horrible. So verse 24, after Eliphaz had finished the hymn, we rose and went back to the city, each to the house where they lived. And the people made a feast for me in gratitude and delight of God. And all my friends came back to me. And all those who had seen me in my former state of happiness asked me, saying, what are those three things here among us? Okay.
All right. So
there's a lot here, man.
There is a lot here. And to me, the first thing that stuck out was just the transition between the end of chapter 9 and into chapter 10, where they just saw this crazy vision to the east, right? They stand Job up. He's like, look, boom, they all see it. And then Eliphaz's response is weird, right?
Like, you mean Elihu?
Yeah, Elihu. Yes.
Okay. Because Eliphaz is the good guy. He believed the vision. He supports Job.
Where it says, but Eliphaz and those that were with him were astonished at these things, and they sat down with me, and replying to me, spoke in boastful words concerning me for 27 days. They repeated it. Like the whole, that, yeah, I misspoke. Okay. It's all of them. Like, it's just an interesting transition, you know, after being shown something like that to the point where they're going to sit down for 27 days and speak boastful words with him, to the point where they're going to have, like, Yahweh was ready to destroy them if not for Job and his ability to, you know, present a sin offering for them as atonement for them.
And this verse 1, 2, and 3 right here, if I were to harmonize this with the book of Job in the canon, this would basically be like, I would, between verses 3 and 4, or verses 2 and 3, I would probably put most of the book of Job.
Yeah, chapter 3 onward, essentially.
Yeah, so like chapter where Yahweh shows up. So like chapter 38, 9 or 40.
Yeah.
So like huge amounts, like what is that? 33, 36 chapters or something like that would go in this chapter if you were trying to harmonize it in a chronological story.
Yeah.
So that's the 27 days. That's why there's so much context or so much dialogue in the canon of Job. But I agree with you. It is weird that they still had a bad attitude, which is, you know, I mean, Eliphaz, wasn't he the one in chapter 8 that said God was unjust for doing this to Job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they definitely, like, they weren't as bad as Elihu, but they definitely had sinned in their reaction to Job and their conversation with him. And so that's why they needed this atonement.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty amazing. So so his wife was speaking the words that Satan prompted her to speak when she said, curse God and die. And then here in verse 7, Elihu has a whole bunch of harsh words. And then it says that he was imbued with the spirit of Satan. How do you think that? Do you think he's just what is this? I mean, do you think that Satan can like possess a person like an unclean spirit?
Right now, I don't think. I'm willing to change that stance. From my understanding, it's similar to like when Satan entered Judas, right? Like when we went over that in the Apocalypse of Abraham.
Yeah,
I think we both concluded that doesn't necessarily mean, because of what we understand regarding spirit beings and angels and what they can do, and how, you know, their offspring, the Nephilim, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, are allowed to inhabit a human
Right.
host, right? So we're suggesting that that's kind of what that would mean, right? If there's like a hierarchy here, that when it says that the spirit of Satan imbued Elihu or went into Judas, we're thinking that because Satan has authority over the unclean spirits that are here on the earth, he can send them to do his will, right? Where he himself isn't necessarily the one that's embodying or possessing a person. So that's how I understand that here. It doesn't need to be fully fleshed out because that would have been the context regarding how he operates.
I agree. Yeah. Yep. And we don't know. I can't look at the original translation anyway. All these capitalized words are the decision of a translator.
Yeah.
So that's where they have to try to understand the context. And we know that, you know, the word Satan just means adversary anyway.
Yeah.
So it could have been an unclean spirit, but they're all under the control of Satan. So it's just like everything the angels does, the Father takes credit for, whether good or bad, and the opinion of the person. Same thing here. All the things the unclean spirits do, Satan will get credit for it. So that's why it is right either which way you want to take it, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And in the latter half of verse 7, there was says, Elihu spoke hard words which are written down in the records left of Elihu. I mean, we're going to see this a couple times in this book, right? There seems to be other manuscripts that correspond with the events in this narrative. And so I haven't seen it. I haven't researched it. If any of you brothers and sisters have, throw up some links to sources for that. Otherwise, it's left a mystery, I guess. An unearthed manuscript out there with that, or perhaps they have them, they just haven't released it or something. But it's interesting.
Yeah, and if this book, I mean, this means that even at the most earliest dating of this book, at the first century BC, they were also referencing the records of Elihu. So this isn't. I don't know. This is interesting. I mean, no, that's not right. Because I mean, I guess it just depends on when we believe the book was originally written. Because if it was just being copied up to the first century BC and further, then it could be the records of Elihu in the kingdom of Edom somewhere.
Yeah,
I got lost to time.
Exactly.
That the Hebrews just didn't adopt to their literature like they did the book of Job.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Sean, verse 8, God appears to Job in a storm and in clouds. Same type of scenario with Mount Sinai, you think? Like same type of, yeah.
That's right. Exodus 19 and 20. It's the same concept, which would make perfect sense to why the canon of Job, Yahweh says, brace yourself like a man because I'm about to speak to you.
Yeah.
Because remember, all the people at the base of Mount Sinai were like, don't let him keep talking. We can't handle it. They were freaking out. So like, I can understand if he showed up with all this power in the same regard. Now, do we think it's God himself, or do we think it's Elohim showing up in behalf of God, an agency of God?
I'm gonna go with the latter.
Okay.
Personally, I do believe Yahweh has shown up on the earth in his physical manifestation. I don't think this was one of the instances, but
yeah, just like all the places in the prophets and First Samuel and First Kings, that the Lord appeared and spoke to so and so. Well, it wasn't just like, we already know that the Father can't literally just hang out in the room with you. You would die. So it's his angels that he sends, right? And then the credit goes back to the Father.
Yeah. So it's interesting in verse 9 where Yahweh's talking to Eliphaz saying, you and your friends have sinned in that you have not spoken the truth concerning my servant Job. I've lied, Sean, in my life. You have too. What about these lies was Yahweh willing to engage in wrath on them? In your opinion, is it just because they have positions of authority and they're coming to another king who's a righteous king, and they're just like literally just being myopic with how they're viewing everything around, even though he's giving them visions and he's, what's the deal with the?
I would say, let me go to the passage in Leviticus. I would say this is a pretty serious transgression of the Father's eyes, because these guys are, to Job's face, they are slandering him. So, like it goes into this two things, I guess. It also would encompass this as well. Directly rebuke your neighbors so that but so that you will not incur guilt on account of him. So they are slandering their brethren, because they're inferring that he's guilty of sin when he's not, and they're
Mhm.
saying you must be right. So without knowledge, without the story, without being there with him for the last 7 years, or what happened to him for his misfortune, they're just assuming that he's sinning when they're just not believing him. And so they're to say, "Hey, man, you're getting this horrible treatment because you deserve it." This isn't the reason why I think this is in the instructions of the covenant, the Torah, is because if you were to slander your people and you were to I mean, some of the inferences of sin could lead to death.
Yeah.
So you are endangering the life of your neighbor if you slander him, if you misrepresent his character, and that's what they're doing with Job. So therefore, what does it say? I mean, it's
Especially
almost like
Sean, especially with the slanderer himself slandering against Job, sending the Persian army to do essentially what they did, the devastation of what came from that, right? I mean, it's
right.
yeah.
And of course, we also have the bearing false witness, right?
Mhm.
So if you bear false witness, and I gotta find that passage real quick, but the punishment for bearing false witness against somebody is that you get the penalty that they would have gotten. So
Right. Yeah.
I mean, these are kings, so their word is a huge testament in any sort of evaluation from a judge to determine the status of a case, right?
Yeah.
So had they had pursued the idea that, oh, Job deserves this is why he's getting all this, he's done some injustice, we don't know what it is, but we know he's unjust, and they went to some sort of elder or judge to try to prosecute Job, they're endangering his life, they would be bearing false witness, and they would be worthy of death themselves since they were wrong. So just those two concepts alone is what came to my mind, is that, yeah, you definitely, these guys, and the fact that Eliphaz was saying, literally slandering God too, saying that he was unjust to do this to Job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's interesting.
basically they got some, like I said earlier, they got a bad attitude. Overall, they have a very judgmental attitude. I know it sounds cliche, right? It sounds kind of trite, but they have a judgmental attitude, like
Mhm.
unnecessarily judgmental.
Yeah, and it's freaky for Elihu, eh? Like his sins did not get pardoned.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and he gets a nasty rap and
Calls him
song.
the evil one.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
are we talking about um like salvific implications here with this, you think? Or is this immediate flesh implications? Like this is
Yeah, I
it
don't know,
sounds like
man.
he's I mean, if you look at verse 16, I mean I'd like to go over some of the lyrics in this song here. They're interesting theologically, but
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I wanted to ask that they actually compared him to the luminary, which
yeah.
I could see that, because at the resurrection you get glorified, you become illuminated with light, and then you will live in the heights of the New Jerusalem. So you literally
Yeah.
might people from the ground literally might look up and see the light body of Ken flying overhead at some point in the future. Not that
Well,
he's up in the fifth layer of the firmament where the stars are, like an actual luminary, but just the inference of the idea that you're a point of light above people because of the resurrection. So
mhm. Yeah, when I read that, Sean, instantly my mind went to First Enoch, where it talks about how the angels are showing Enoch the courses of the stars, and they're essentially saying that there's a star for each human being to come into existence, right?
that's
There's
right.
like a
That's right.
paralleled number there, a ratioed correlation, and to
Oh,
me,
good
it's just
catch.
interesting because it's like Elihu has a star and his luminary's lost its light, like it's gone now. I don't know if that's just like a metaphor for
Yeah,
you know what I mean, but
that's a good catch. I could see that. Yeah. So, and then of course they then immediately say, now your glory and honor and stature is going to be in Hades, which
mhm.
is not a good look.
The doorkeepers of the place of darkness shall give him their glory and beauty as share. Interesting.
So
There's
this is
entities keeping the door in Hades.
I think verse 17 is a pretty strong charge, saying that he loved the beauty of the serpent and the scales of the dragon, and his gall and
Hmm.
his blood belongs to the northern one. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah. What? Okay. So parentheses aside for a sec. What do we got here? This is assuming he's worshiping Satan, right? The serpent.
I don't.
He loved.
this could be. I mean, this could be the moment where they, because of all this spiritual activity going on and this extreme circumstances, that the other kings just go ahead and out him.
Yeah.
That he's been worshiping Baal, in the serpent. But otherwise, if this is just a metaphoric inference to his bad behavior and the fact that the father said he wouldn't pardon him, then it's pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
But it would make a lot of sense if they took this opportunity to have been like, yeah, he's been worshiping Baal anyway.
All right. Zifuni, the adder. Have you heard of that before? Like what language is this? Is a Syriac name? Is this a...
I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
If anyone knows in the chat, if you know what Zifuni, what language that is, but I'm guessing it's translated for us as adder.
Yeah.
But
which is a snake, right?
Yeah, we know the serpent was worshipped throughout these cultures.
So he didn't fear the Lord. He hated those whom he has chosen. Yeah, Elihu he's not a good guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because when the father shows up, he venerates Job. He judges the other three kings that were not Elihu. He judges them that they do need atonement because they were out of pocket too. But then Elihu, he's like, nah, I ain't messing with this dude. He's I'm not making atonement. I'm not offering atonement to him.
Job, you mean, isn't?
No, Elihu, like the father, when the father instructs Job to make atonement for his three friends,
right. Yeah, okay.
And Elihu is left out. So therefore the father is saying, don't make atonement for Elihu. He doesn't deserve it. So, or he doesn't, deserve it. No one deserves it, but he doesn't get it at this moment, right? Which I think is fascinating because I love the fact that in verse 20, the song Eliphaz is like, righteous is the Lord, his judgments are true. With him, there's no preference of person, for he judges all alike. And this is just a reference to being like, hey, all five of us are standing here. This dude, we may not, this dude got called a serpent. He got called had gall and venom. He got called an evil one, and he's not getting atonement. And hey, the righteous judge knows how to judge,
Right. Yeah.
So it's very fascinating. They're not contesting the father's opinion of Elihu.
Right, and why would they? they had an epiphany of realization that you don't question this person.
So real quick, I do love that you brought up the fact earlier that it was he showed up with thunder and clouds and right, this big show, right, when the Lord shows up and they start. So now they're doing and saying everything Job does and says. Whereas before, for the last 27 to 35 days, they've been questioning everything Job has said, even though Job has just been repeating everything the Lord has told him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's interesting that they needed a sign, basically, and a wonder before now they take it seriously and they're listening to Job now.
Right.
That could also be a
second sign and a wonder. Yeah.
A poor character by these guys. They needed to be led properly by a righteous person.
Yeah. Verse 21 is interesting to me, Sean. It was very reminiscent of 1 Enoch chapter 1, where, behold, the Lord comes, the holy ones have been prepared, right? It did that mustering of the angels and how he's coming to enact vengeance on the earth eschatologically in days ahead. So it's interesting, right? It's like, what did they have? Did Job have the Enochian writings? Did he have Abraham's writings? Did he have all, Noah's writings? Is that how we determine righteousness, through those passed on ancient manuscripts? Did he have possession of them, which is why we're able to, not even just Job, but Eliphaz is here singing this, right?
I would say yes, because if you remember Jubilees, Abraham did have them.
Yeah.
And Abraham, Job is a descendant of Esau. And so even before Esau became an adult and transgressed the covenant, he was probably taught the gospel of the kingdom and the writings of Enoch as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He and Jacob and Ishmael. So like these are all that same family line. I wouldn't put it past them to have had at some point talked about, had a copy of, or had passed down orally the writings of Enoch. Because it says Abraham had them,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Jubilees 21.
Yeah. Verse 22 is really awesome too. It makes me feel powered and it's a joyful exclamation here. Let the saints rejoice and let their hearts exult in gladness, for they shall receive the glory which is in store for them. That's that promise of being made perfect, right? And the kingdom to come. So it's awesome.
And I love the end of verse 21, the crowns and prizes of the victors precede them. That would make sense, because at the last trumpet on the day of the Lord, the saints rise from the dead and are given their new bodies and their crowns of life. Right. So we're metaphorically, I mean, I don't know if they're physically you're going to, pop out the ground with your robe of white and your crown on, but you're promised the crown of life at the resurrection. Right. And of course, you're promised to have a placement in the kingdom. And this is fascinating because the Lord comes, behold, the holy ones have been prepared. That's the saints, the warrior angels that are coming back with him. The crowns and prizes of the victors precede them, because the first resurrection is what happens to start the day of the Lord. So even the specific timing of the last trumpet is correct in this. So this is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Theologically on point so far, Sean.
Yeah,
it is.
So then,
I guess we just jump into 11 if you want.
Sure. Do you want this one?
Yeah, I can do it. All right, but I, being desirous to take up again my work of benevolence for the poor, asked them, saying, give me each a lamb for the clothing of the poor in the state of nakedness, and 4 drachmas of silver or gold. Then the Lord blessed all that was left to me, and after a few days I became rich again in merchandise, in flocks, and all things which I had lost, and I received all in double number again. Then I also took as wife your mother, and became the father of you 10 in place of the 10 children that had died. And now, my children, let me admonish you. Behold, I am about to die. You will take my place.
Sorry, here we go.
That's good. Only do not forsake the Lord. Be charitable towards the poor. Do not disregard the feeble. Take not unto yourselves wives from strangers. Behold, my children, I shall divide among you what I possess, so that each may have control over his own and have full power to do good with his share. And after he had spoken this, he brought all his goods and divided them among his 7 sons, but he gave nothing of his goods to his daughters. Then they said to their father, our Lord and Father, are we not also your children? Why then do you not also give us a share of your possessions? Then said Job to his daughters, do not become angry, my daughters. I have not forgotten you. Behold, I have preserved for you a possession better than that which your brothers have taken. And he called his daughter, whose name was Day, or Yemimah, and said to her, take this double ring used as a key, and go to the treasure house, and bring me the golden casket, that I may give you your possession. And she went and brought it to him. And he opened it and took out 3 stringed girdles, about the appearance of which no man can speak, for they were not earthly work, but celestial sparks of light flashed through them, like the rays of the sun. And he gave 1 girdle to each of his daughters, and said, put these as girdles around you, in order that all the days of your life that they may encircle you, and endow you with everything good. And the other daughter, whose name was Cassia, said, is this the possession of which you say it is better than that of our brothers? What now? Can we live on this? And their father said to them, not only have you here enough to live on, but these bring you into a better world to live in the heavens. Or do you not know, my children, the value of these things here? Here then, when the Lord had deemed me worthy to have compassion on me, and to take off my body the plagues and the worms, he called me and handed to me these 3 strings. And he said to me, rise and gird up your loins like a man. I will demand of you and declare you unto me. And I took them and girt them around my loins, and immediately did the worms leave my body, and likewise did the plagues. And my whole body took new strength through the Lord, and this I passed on as though I had never suffered. But also in my heart I forgot the pains. Then spoke the Lord unto me in his great power, and showed to me all that was and will be. Now then, my children, in keeping these, you will not have the enemy plotting against you, nor evil intentions in your mind, because this is a phylacterion from the Lord. Rise then, and gird these around you before I die, in order that you may see the angels come at my parting, so that you may behold with wonders the power of God. Then rose the one whose name was Day, Yemimah, and girt herself, and immediately she departed her body, as her father had said, and she put on another heart, as if she never cared for earthly things. And she sang angelic hymns in the voice of angels, and she chanted forth the angelic praise of God while dancing. Then the other daughter, Cassia by name, put on the girdle, and her heart was transformed, so that she no longer wished for worldly things. And her mouth assumed the dialect of the heavenly rulers, archons, and she sang the donology of the work of the high place. And if anyone wishes to know the work of the heavens, he may take an insight into the hymns of Cassia. Then did the other daughter, by the name of Amatelius horn, or Karen Hapuka, girded herself, and her mouth spoke in the language of those on high, for her heart was transformed, being lifted above the worldly things. She spoke in the dialect of the cherubim, singing the praise of the ruler of the cosmic powers and extolling their glory. And he who desires to follow the vestiges of the glory of the Father will find them written down in the prayers of Amaltheus' horn. All
Wow.
right. Okay, so we have a lot of fascinating things going on here with Job's daughters. They were gifted some really unique, non-earthly possessions that seem, if I'm honest, far-fetched. But let's discuss them, Sean.
Okay.
Let's
discuss them.
discuss these things. I mean, it's interesting. So the father gave Job these three girdles, right? Is that what they're calling them?
Yep. So we got here
Um,
it is. Put these girdles about you around in all the days of your life, that you may circle and die with every good thing. So that's interesting.
yeah,
But I think that they're 3-stringed, which I think is interesting. And we're going to read about that in the prayer of Amatelius' horn in a little bit.
yeah.
Because
So
I actually
Job
have
put,
that.
yeah. So Job put these on, and
Mhm.
instantly his body. I find this fascinating. His body, transformed back to the healthy state that it was prior to him taking on the plagues. The worms
Yep.
were gone, and then it said that his heart, like it's almost like
He
everything
forgot
that
the
he
pain.
witnessed. Yeah, everything he witnessed up to that point was like not remembered again,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like instantly having your PTSD removed
Yeah,
from all he just went through, if I could put it like that. Um, Before we get to the actual tassel things, the string things, um, I just wanted to quickly address this because a lot of people might be thinking that um, it says that he didn't give his daughters an inheritance like he's supposed to,
yeah,
but he actually does. He in the explanation of this, he actually explained that not only is this clearly in a gold, like very valuable to him because he was keeping it in a golden casket, but the fact that he says in verse 16, and their father said to them, not only have you here enough to live on, and to me, that makes me think that he's talking about his wealth of his kingdom and his house, right? Because you
yeah,
remember in ancient cultures, if the daughter, she lived with the family and the father until she got married and went and became one with the other man, and then went into his care and his financial care. So it's not like this isn't modern culture. This isn't like the girls are saying, "Give me an apartment in New York City, give me an inheritance. I want some of my trust fund." No, this isn't like that. Like
yeah,
he's already saying, like, well, for one, culturally, the natural flow of things would be if you get married, you're going to go off and have an inheritance with someone else anyway. But furthermore, you have this here with me, the kingdom. But then he focuses with the conjunction there. But these bring you these strings that I'm giving you bring you better into a better world to live in the heavens. And I don't think that's literal. I don't think that they immediately, because they don't after they put them on, right? They don't just
yeah,
immediately go into heaven, right?
yeah,
They don't get like glorified bodies. But these phrases to me just makes me think that I I don't actually. The more I studied this, the more I was reminded of that. I think these are actual tassels.
yeah. You think they're like tzitzits?
I do,
Yeah,
I do, and here's why. In verse 21, when he compares them to the phylacteron or a charm. Now, guys, just in case you understand this, this is translated from Greek, and it's also from the Syriac, which is a version of Aramaic. Okay, so that term charm, it doesn't always. I mean, it has multiple uses. Yes, the occult uses it to speak about like an amulet, right, to ward off evil spirits from a what's the word, not like direct witchcraft, but like it's like a form of like a rabbit's foot, like a
yeah, like yeah,
superstitious belief,
yeah,
right? So that's one of the uses of the definition of this Greek word charm. Another use is an actual necklace or an actual stringed concept that you would tie to yourself or tie on yourself. But I love the fact that the whomever whether this is in the original text or the translator inserted the word phylacteron, because when we
yeah.
read
That's Greek.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, when we read the idea here in Numbers 15 about the tzitzit, um, says, Lord said, speak to Israelites, tell them throughout the generations to come to me, that are make for themselves tassels for the corners of their garments, and with a blue cord on each tassel. They'll serve as tassels to you, that you remember all the commandments of the Lord, you may obey them, not prostitute yourselves, but follow in your own heart and your own eyes. So he tells them to put these things in their garments, right? But then if you go back and look in Deuteronomy chapter 6, and he says, I think it's in chapter 6, and if I'm mistaken, help me out in the chat, guys, what verse it is. But he's talking about how you need to bind these. Oh, here it is. Yeah, the commands of God, to tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts of your house and your gates. And I'm pretty sure some old translations call these phylacteries at this point, the frontlets, which was the word for phylacteries.
Yeah,
the frontlets. So.
I want to be able to. Sorry, in Numbers, what you just reading off in Numbers, I want to pull that up in the Greek.
Okay.
See if it's phylacterion.
Okay. Well, but the point though I'm saying is, this is a simile that's being told, right? Bind the commandments of God on your hand as frontlets, as the phylactery concept. So it's almost as if the cultures around them had this idea of a phylactery that was a charm, like an amulet to ward off evil spirits, which was very common in the pagan nations around Israel. And that's why the Father would say to them, these tzitzits and the commands of God, which the tzitzits directly correlate to the commands of God. I think we agree on that, right?
Absolutely.
So this is where my understanding is coming from. If anyone has a different conclusion, that's okay. It's just the way it speaks to me, is that the commandments are directly related to the tzitzits. The tzitzits are told to be worn. The commandments are told to be impressed upon you and tied upon you, and put them on your doorpost, put them on your house, put them everywhere that you want. And they're compared to frontlets, which would be the phylacterion. So if the phylacterion was the word and the term and the idea of an amulet for keeping evil away from you, that was more of like a superstition of the pagan nations, then it's appropriate. This actually, if I'm to take what we read in the Testament of Job seriously, this actually would give me a better understanding of what the tzitzits were originally intended for. It was an idea that if you do the covenant behavior, which are the commandments, which is what the tzitzit represents, then you will keep evil away from you because you'll walk in the blessings of the covenant.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
you will not have the enemy plotting against you.
Right.
Or have evil intentions in your mind. Yeah.
So that's where, if this is, and it's also very interesting that they're called, 3 strings. That means it's very possible one of them could have been blue. Right?
Very interesting. When I read this, I just right away thought about, like, Wonder Woman, how she's got that golden, like, I don't know what it's called, like it's like almost like a whip where she like whips, and it's just
technically called the lasso of truth.
Yeah. that's what I'm picturing here with these, right? It's just like these angelic.
These Edomite cowgirls are given lassos.
Yeah.
It's possible, maybe. I personally, I'm leaning towards the idea of, because they're described as this idea of flag. But yeah, they could be something else. But because they're 3 stringed, is a lasso got more than one cord, or is it multiple?
No, are they 3 stringed, or are there 3 strings and 1 string goes to each daughter? Because that's how I understood it.
Sorry, let me go back.
I was thinking like a sash. Like when I originally thought about this, yes, I thought the Wonder Woman thing, just in terms of how it's described. But I'm thinking almost like the angels, how they're described in Revelation and other places about having like a sash of gold, or like, I almost think that's kind of what that was alluding to here.
Okay. Well, this may be a good moment to read the prayer of Amatelius Horn, which is mentioned in this chapter. So, guys, I actually got this, and I put it down for us to take a look at. Apparently somebody published this a long time ago because they had found it and published it. So this is the prayers of Amatelius Horn, as supposedly kept through the record, because we were just talking about all these other works being mentioned, right? Yeah. So this poem says, "No fairer daughters on this earth than Job's, the second set of children that he had. Around his deathbed gathered siblings 10. His 7 sons inheritance he gave. To plaintive daughters this alternative. It's clear, their value you don't understand. These items taken from my treasure chest. Hear this then. When the Lord reached out his hand, when finally he decided to relent, the plagues and worms my body did manifest. He healed me of those awful maladies. Once my affliction passed, he called to me. 3 triple-stringed girdles gave as charms.
Okay. Yeah.
These girdles, 3, now take them, gird your loins, as men for battle, manhood binding up. You're jealous of inheritance they have. The value of these girdles far exceeds. The 3-stringed girdles to his daughters gave. No earthly fashion were celestial in their design. As diamond cords, the light flashed through them like a glinting rainbow beam. Yemima, first to wear her father's gift, at once, upon her donning of this garb, departed from her body, heart transformed, as if she never cared for earthly things. She danced while chanting hymns, angelic praise. None understood the languages she spoke. Cassia, next to don the girdle gift. Just like Yemima, her experience, her heart transformed, all earthly cares forgot. Angelic dialects, the hymns she sang. Ethereal, the place where archons rule. The high place has its own doxology. The last girl's name was Amatelius Horn. She girded up just like the other 2. Just like her sisters, she transmogrified. Ecstatic dancing, glossolalia. I don't know what that means. The praises that she offered up to God. When Job expired and the body to the grave, procession, daughters of 3, they marched ahead. They wore their girdles, singing hymns of praise unto the Lord who rules the universe.
Yeah. I think that's like tongues, if I remember. Glossolalia.
Is
like
it?
Speaking in different languages or something. Yeah, interesting, man. Thanks for reading that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's okay if we disagree. That's what it brought to my mind was it seemed interesting because like obviously if you're doing the commandments, you're more susceptible to having the gift of tongues flow through you. And Ken, if this book is correct, we're reading about the gift of tongues.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
So where's all the Baptists? Let's talk.
Well, it's interesting because it does say like languages that are not understood, right? And I know Paul says kind of rhetorically, if I were to speak in, even the tongues of angels, right? Are we to assume that they do have their own angelic language?
Well, I think so because they're the ones that came down and gave the language, right?
Yeah. For some reason, I thought, I don't know if it was Jubilees or something where it talked about how the original tongue of creation was Hebrew, right? But that doesn't necessarily include angels, I guess, if that's what we're thinking here, maybe.
It's like how do the angels that come to give the nations the languages of the nations to them, did they give them because they knew them, or how does that work even, right? How does that is it just touching the brain and then suddenly you think in a different way? And if that's so, the angels seems like they would have to know those languages too in order to know what's going on as they oversee different regions and record the sins of people, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that angels could speak a multitude of languages regardless of the original language of creation.
Yeah.
To me.
Okay.
But yeah, this is the reference here for the audience. 1 Corinthians 13:1. There is an inference to the angels speaking in different tongues, different languages.
Yeah.
So, and this is Old Testament, guys. So I made this controversial video a few years ago. It's called Acts 2, Nothing New. And people always ask, I got pastors mock me on camera for it. Like one interview I did where they're like, "Oh, really? No, so nothing new happened." And I'm like, "No, the gifts of the Spirit flowed all the time. Like this is what happens when there's a faithful priest and the Father can flow through him and give his Spirit to mankind. The Father doesn't do dispensational doctrine. That's a lie from the devil." So like, it's just, I love this. This is an interesting little passage here, man. Very interesting.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It might be worth potentially using something out of this passage for future lyrics in my own songs. Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to just go through 12 and just finish this book out?
Just for the audience, for anyone watching that may suddenly say, "Oh my gosh, Amatelius Horn, guys, that's an ancient Greek myth of one of the God's children," right? Again, it even gives you the translation here. Oh, I'm sorry. It even gives you the translation in verse 27 of what her name would have been transliterated to the Greek. So it seems like the Amatelius Horn was like a nickname he called that third daughter, because she was the abundant. And by the way, the terminology of where Amatelius Horn came from the Greek myth is that it's an abundance that someone's blessed with, like a cornucopia of fruit spilling out and spilling over. So that's it sounds like this is a nickname, and that's why they get her true name inserted in there.
Yeah, it would make sense why these, these daughters, and specifically this Amatelius Horn, would be mythologized, right? I mean, this is
Right.
an amazing event.
Yeah. And if she's the last child, then she's definitely going to get a special little attention out of 10 children. She's the 20th and last 10th alive child. Job's definitely going to spoil her and probably give her a nickname. So, yeah. You want the next one?
Yeah, I can finish this out. All right, after these three had finished singing hymns, did I, Nahor, brother of Job, sit down next to him as he lay down. So this is in the perspective of Job's brother Nahor. If you guys haven't already picked up on it, we mentioned earlier that this is him narrating the book. So this is interesting just to know who's writing here. And I heard the marvelous things of the three daughters of my brother, one always succeeding the other amidst awful silence. And I wrote down this book containing the hymns, except the hymns and signs of the holy word, for these were the great things of God. And Job lay down from sickness on his couch, yet without pain and suffering, because his pain did not take strong hold of him on account of the charm of the girdle which he had wound around himself. But after 3 days, Job saw the holy angels come for his soul, and instantly he rose and took the cithara and gave it to his daughter Day. And to Cassia he gave a censer with perfume, and to Amalthea's horn he gave a timbrel, in order that they may bless the holy angels who came for his soul. And they took these and sang and played on the psaltery and praised and glorified God in the holy dialect. And after this he came, he who sits upon the great chariot, and kissed Job, while his three daughters looked on. But the others saw it not. And he took the soul of Job, and he soared upward, taking the soul by the arm, and carrying it up upon the chariot, and he went towards the east. And his body, however, was brought to the grave, while the three daughters marched ahead, having put on their girdles, and singing hymns in praise of God. Then held Nahor, his brother, and his 7 sons, with the rest of the people and the poor, the orphans and the feeble ones, a great mourning over him, saying, Woe unto us, for today has been taken from us the strength of the feeble, the light of the blind, the father of the orphans. The receiver of strangers has been taken off, the leader of the erring, the coverer of the naked, the shield of the widows, who would not mourn for the man of God. And as they were mourning in this and in that form, they would not suffer him to put into the grave. After 3 days, however, he was finally put into the grave, like one in sweet slumber, and he received the name of the good, who will remain renowned throughout all generations of the world. He left 7 sons and 3 daughters, and there were no daughter found on earth as fair as the daughters of Job. The name of Job was formerly Jobab, and he was called Job by the Lord. He had lived before his plague 85 years, and after the plague he took the double share of all. As a result, also his years he doubled, which is 170 years. Thus, he lived altogether 255 years. And he saw sons of his sons unto the 4th generation. It is written that he will rise up with those whom the Lord will reawaken to our Lord by glory. Amen. All right.
So beautiful.
Yes, very cool. So what's interesting here, Sean, is not only the fact that they're awaiting, Job knows he's going to pass, right? We've discussed this in previous episodes, this concept of the fathers of our faith, knowing, they're lying in their deathbed and they're just like, all right, I'm going to be dying here. And then they recount certain events in their life, right, for their progeny to know about. But in this situation here, we have them awaiting the angel to come and receive his soul, right? And so we know that actually corresponds with Second Esdras. This idea that the righteous do get taken to Sheol, accompanied by an angel. One of their job characteristics, certain angels have that responsibility to escort people to the netherworld until the time of resurrection happens. And so we see this, but what fascinates me, Sean, was just kind of the way it was worded with direction of him being taken up, right? So we're like, oh, wait a minute. They're not taking him to heaven, are they? But then it says towards the east, right? The same area of where the vision had initially been shown to the 3 kings and Job's wife. And so I just find this eastern direction is fascinating to me, because I think we've seen this in First Enoch as well. Just this idea of it possibly going towards that end of the firmament and then down through.
Yes. Like the actual entrance to Sheol.
Yeah.
In the biblical creation model. Yeah. It's very interesting. And apparently there's a chariot involved here.
Yeah. So that which does that reminisce the idea of Elijah at all?
Well, in my understanding, Elijah was taken away, and I like it. I did a whole video on this.
Yeah.
And
I still hold to that he was alive. He was taken away alive and just
yeah,
removed.
yeah,
But this is fascinating to me because it's like, well, okay. If the alternative is that he was taken to heaven, which most people think he was it just a similar way of how he was taken as Job was taken here, up in a chariot and then away to the east? And
yeah. What I do love the distinction though between his body being dead and then it's specifically saying verse 9 they took his soul.
yeah,
Right. So they're, but I don't know why. To me, and it's also after 3 days. If you look in verse 5.
yep,
So they came for him after 3 days, and I think you and I've talked about this in the past about there seems to be 3 or 4 days availability to be resurrected,
yep.
and then after that, if they've already taken your soul to Sheol, it's very, very unlikely. But at the
Unless you're
same time,
Lazarus, yeah,
unless you're Lazarus, or obviously God can do what He wants, but
yeah,
we're just going off of patterns that we've seen, and also Jonah. It seems like Jonah in chapter 2. It seems like he's praying from Sheol,
yeah,
so like he's crying out from Sheol as he just went down there, basically.
yeah,
It's like I saw this hilarious video where this guy's watching those videos that show you how to take a like de-arm a pistol, like someone's got a gun on you and you like try to slap the other hand and take the other hand,
right.
and then it shows him trying to do that, and then it just flashes and he's in heaven. He's just pretty hilarious. So
Nice.
yeah, it's like as soon as Joel realized, oh my gosh, I'm in Sheol, he starts crying out, and the Father resurrects him because he had a purpose for him. But so I love the fact that it's going through some of these details, like you said. 3 days after he's dead, they
Mhm.
come for his actual soul. They do go to a specific direction, and this, it's interesting because
It's very interesting, Sean. Sorry to cut you off. It's because
yeah,
prior to even just reading this and just understanding biblical cosmology, like, um, when I think if I were to die right here where I am, right, and after 3 days, let's say, then I descend. Am I literally descending through this ground here down all the way into Sheol, or is there, as we see here, an entity that takes you away into a certain direction within the created model to go through a certain corridor down? You know what I mean? Like there seems to
exactly.
be, yeah, like an
Yeah.
actual route.
Yeah. And the angels would be probably comforting you the whole time, trying to tell you, hey, it's okay. Come with us, and we're going to take you to a place of rest, a good place.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. And apparently, whatever the soul is, it can be
Grabbed onto.
grabbed by an angel.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Which I guess would make sense because they're going to grab the unclean spirits when the Yeshua returns, and they're going to
Yeah.
throw them in the lake of fire. So
And they're spirit beings, right? And so and that's
right,
kind of what the soul is anyways. It's a spiritual
right,
form, so they can
right.
tangibly grab at it. Yeah.
Um,
Was it
what
okay?
other?
Before we get to the
Sure.
last possible
Good.
discrepancy here,
What verse are you looking at?
just hit the amount of years here, the difference between that, and was it the Septuagint that mentioned the difference of years?
Yep.
Yeah,
This is another moment where the numbers don't add up. So the numbers, are, well, not said they don't add up, but they're not the same as the Septuagint.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
not even close, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, I don't know why that is. I don't. I just have to remind folks that even within the Masoretic and the Septuagint, the two major historical translations, there's a lot of the ages of the patriarchs that do not match in
yeah,
Genesis 5 and Genesis 11, and I do not understand it. So, is this one of those little moments that Origen warned us about? Where the Pharisees of his day were intentionally changing stuff to try to discredit the whole book? I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know.
But nonetheless, I mean, it's a great book. I've learned a lot just studying it with you. Considering certain points that I hadn't thought of prior to my own studies with it, and I'm
It is
still slightly on the fence with it. I gotta
okay.
say, like, if I was on a fence, Sean, one side is 100% pro this book, the other side is obviously the alternative to that. I'm leaning, like, I'm falling back into the pro, but I'm
Okay.
still on the fence technically. So
I think that's good. I think people need to see that, that we're
yeah,
still studying it out. I what a interesting, regardless of the overall book's validity, what an interesting comment here in verse 11 and 12 by the people at his funeral. And they're saying, woe to us, because this guy's gone. Think of all the good stuff that was told about him doing. And then they're saying, woe to us, because this dude's gone. That means who's going to take his place? It's like, will someone as good as this guy take his place?
Yeah, exactly.
Or will a despotic ruler take his place? And these people are just like, woe to us, this amazing person that was taking care of us, and now he's gone. So it's what a eulogy, basically, right? That the
Yeah.
people are you were so good that not only they're crying that you're gone, but they're scared who's going to replace you. Yeah, this was an interesting depiction of Job.
But it's interesting because these people that mourn for him like this and were saying such things about him, it's like, where were they the last 7 years?
Right.
It's almost like there was a
Right.
spiritual stupor over the land, you know what I mean? Where people were in a state of confusion. It's, to me,
Yeah.
it's just like all of a sudden you're caring now because the guy's, not chilling out on the dunghill anymore, and he's healed up and he's got, daughters and a new wife. And
Well, if we take the numbers, seriously from the next passage here in verse 18, then so he would have been 90, 92, 93 when he was healed of the plague, and then he lived another to 170. So he lived another 170 years.
Yeah.
So that means there's a lot of other people that lived and died, and maybe that
True.
original, what I mean?
True.
This could
Yeah,
be
yeah.
the new
Right.
people that he. So that means that all that wonderful behavior that's been depicted of him throughout this whole book, he kept doing that for another 170 years.
Right. Yeah. No,
So,
that's true. Those original people were probably gone by then. Yeah.
7 immovable tables at his house full of food 24 hours a day for the poor to come get, sending food to other regions, sending, ridiculous amounts of food given to people, doing business contracts with people so they can go into other cities and make profits just to give those to the poor. Like, oh my goodness, 170 years of a righteous king. Like, this entire region would have been greatly blessed as a result of this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah.
Can't imagine what that's like, especially nowadays with our various despotic rulers over us right now. But the ruler who is going to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords, he's coming, right? And he's going to have resurrected Job back in the land.
Yes, and of
too,
course,
so.
yeah, I guess we didn't even touch on that, huh? Verse 19, it does directly tell us, at least Nahor, the brother, right in this book, he believes Job will be in the resurrection.
Yeah.
So he believes the visions that Job claimed to have seen. Does Hebrews 11 mention Job?
I don't think.
Let me go look real quick. I can't remember.
Is he in that Hall of Faith?
Because that would be the only place I could think of, New Testament or post Job, that mentions him in regard to salvation, in regard to resurrection.
Yeah, I don't think he's in here.
Yeah, he's not mentioned in verse 32. But either way, I mean, if I take even the canon book of Job, I would believe he's in the resurrection, as he claims in, chapter 29. So it's a fascinating story. My conclusion for the book of Job, the testament of Job, I should say, from the Syriac, is that I would give it a pass. And I know a lot of people might think, oh, you're just being biased because you like it. Because I studied how translations happen, I guess. That's why I would lean toward giving it a pass, is because I know that when you look up, like, it's got multiple translations through multiple different cultures. Also, there's Greek infused translations from modern scholars, and apparently they still have Amatelius horn, that poem that was a validating concept that's only mentioned in this book.
Yeah, is that in the Syriac Orthodox?
The poem?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do they have that? You don't know? Okay.
I don't know. But then also for me, you got the Septuagint mentioning specifically another book in Syriac talking about Job. So to me, that's where I would lean on what we've learned in the past 3 years as we study these manuscripts and how they're translated over time. That would give me the validity to stand on this. And then also the things that happen in this theologically, I personally see a ton of validation for in Scripture, and it's so, yeah, I would give it a pass. I think it's pretty fascinating, and how interesting that or at least the Amatelius horn, the poem thing, described those 3-stringed strings, those girds that they gird themselves with, that were like diamond.
Yeah. They
Say
had
it was
like,
because they shined, like they were made like diamond laced or something like that. They shined in the sun.
they had
or
like
something.
the rainbow
Yeah.
passing through with the light and all that. Yeah.
So I think that's pretty. Sounds like it was a beautiful thing. And you've got, I mean, guys, you've also got gifts of the Spirit being mentioned, you know, way before the days of Yeshua. So I think that's pretty fascinating too. Not and just specific. I should qualify, Ken, because a lot of people might not. A lot of people. I don't want people to assume or conflate the idea that the gift of the Spirit is only speaking in another language,
Yeah.
or speaking in an angelic language. Because I think the word tongues has been kind of abused and taken out of context so
Big
much.
time.
People
Yeah.
don't realize that it's actually you're speaking another language. You're not just babbling.
Yeah.
So if you're truly doing it right and there's no one to interpret, then no one's edified, like Paul tries to explain. So I'm not saying that speaking in tongues that no one can understand is always babbling. I'm just saying I agree with Paul when he says pray for their interpretation so that people can be edified by it.
Right.
Otherwise, how do they know you're speaking in the tongue of an angel or just babbling? You know what I mean? You might be speaking in Uganda, whatever language they speak, or Ghana, which is like some form of French. You may be speaking in a language that is known, but no interpreter. You have no idea. No one's edified. So I just think it's fascinating here that you have this mention of this mindset, even way back then, that of the multiple gifts of the Spirit, being able to speak in a different language was one of them. You know,
Yeah.
and I know that we've talked about the book of Jasher, how we're going to review it. And I think we see something like that in the book of Jasher, don't we?
We do. We do. Yeah.
So thanks for the patience, Ken. I was kind of going through all that to get to this segue that yeah, we're also going to test the book of Jasher, guys, because I think that something like that when it comes to languages and angels is claimed in the book of Jasher as well. So
yeah. No,
we'll
it
have to
was
take a
fun,
look at
man.
that.
Yes, we will. And this has been a really fun series, these 3 episodes looking into the Testament of Job, a fascinating little read that definitely expounds a little further into the events that we see in the canonical book of Job. And so, do what you have to do, brothers and sisters. Read this book, research it for yourself. Sean and I obviously are here to provide commentary and our own, positions and angles with all our studies, so that you can form your own conclusions as well. But at the end of the day, it's clear that the Father has an amazing message, and that is that if you're in covenant with Him and you desire to be a righteous individual, He can resurrect you through His Son Yeshua in days ahead. And so this book actually seems to be championing that type of theology. So to me, that leans me further off into the fence towards that positive side. But like I said, as we've mentioned throughout this series, there's a couple discrepancies to me that kind of raise the brow a little bit here with certain numbering of camels and sheep and his age and this and that. But it could literally just be, the lying tongues of the scribes, doing their mischievry that they've been called out for doing anyway. So I can't know that. That's why I'm leaning towards that kind of. I'm not sure what to do with it yet, but it's just a good. For me, I'm learning as we do some more of these more difficult books that seem to just be aligned perfectly with the rest of the canon of 66, but still have minor discrepancies. It's like maybe there is room for leniency, I guess. Just knowing what you do know about history and what men have done with these words and their agendas. If you can pick up on their agenda and see how and why they would mess with some of these texts, then to me that might be worth reinvestigating and looking into with regards to how hardcore we're going to be towards yes or no on a manuscript. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I know if I was a first century Pharisee, and I had all the traditions of Judaism as are documented, and I hated Edom, then I would get rid of this book in a heartbeat, or I would change it to discredit it in a heartbeat. Right? If I was that brood viper that Yeshua had to deal with in those days, the same council of rabbis of Pharisees that in approximately AD 90 declared that all believers in Messiah were banned from synagogues, and then they started collecting their own canon immediately to hide Christ. So this had a messianic reference in here, This had resurrection reference in here. This had, all this amazing stuff. Like if you ask modern day rabbi today about the resurrection, I have it on camera. It's not a straight answer.
Yeah, it had priesthood, it had Torah,
Yeah.
it had all that stuff that they don't want other nations doing, or at least before Sinai, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this definitely, if this is why I think we talked about it in episode 1 of this book, looking at this book, just that there was a pretty large claim by Origen in approximately 293 AD that he was saying that a lot of these texts were being intentionally changed by the Pharisees in the early days because they wanted to discredit these books. So it's very interesting. I don't know.
Amen, brother. I'm looking through the chat here. Not seeing too many questions. If you guys have questions, go ahead and maybe write in all caps question and then put your question there. But if not, thank you so much for joining us on this quest for seeing what this Testament of Job is all about. I'm not sure what book we're going to be doing next. I know Sean, possibly teased Jasher. We're gonna have to discuss how we want to take that angle with regards to that book, because it's a large book.
Yeah,
it's a large book, and we're trying to stick to a 20 episode season type thing, and we're reaching the end of episode 3, or season 3 rather. So we might not do it this season. We'll see. We have a lot to discuss, Sean, you and I, but it's been fun, brother. I really appreciate everything that you do here, and for all you people, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like or the thumbs down, whatever you want to do. Comment on it. Go see Sean's channel, Kingdom in Context, Kingdom Cast, his secondary channel. Like him there, and keep an eye out for him and West Blaze. Actually have a show that they do, Uncommon Ground. Check it out at West Blaze Music channel as well, and just keep up with what's going on out there in the interwebs. It's fun. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and if you guys are following Kingdom Cast channel, here in about an hour and 45 minutes, I'm going to do another Investigating Babylon series tonight. We're talking about the image of the beast, Ken. So if you're not asleep yet, I know you're like totally different time zone, but if you're not asleep yet, yeah, brother, I think it's going to be so interesting to see all the history we dive into, that we've been staring at the image of the beast this whole time.
I can't watch it tonight, unfortunately. I'll likely watch it tomorrow.
Okay,
no problem. It'll be late.
It'll be good to put on in the car as you're driving to work or something.
Yeah.
Well, brother, you're blessed and I love you. I hope that we're able to do this again next week, guys. If we aren't able to be here again next week, it's either because of our schedules don't align, or we just haven't finished studying the book that we want to present to you in a coherent fashion. It takes a lot of thought and effort and time to actually, we don't just put the thing up on and read it for the first time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we feel like that would be kind of irresponsible. So we actually do.
Although I'm sure they would appreciate us
right.
picking a random book and just going with it, right? See how we do.
So we actually try to. That's how I found this. The poem of Amatelius Horn, and some of the other information about this one. We have to study these books, right? So please be patient with us if we're not here next week. But I was happy to do this series with you.
Yeah, it's ditto, brother. Ditto. All right, bless you guys. Thank you so much, and keep you safe and comforted through these times, and just do the commandments, stay in covenant, and keep your eyes on that gospel message, and you will receive joy in this day and age. So it's imperative that we think about those things and that we lift each other up in prayer and comfort each other with that message, because that's gonna be what's gonna get us through, right? So
that's right, guys. Go get Ken's album. Here it is.
Could communicate a message to mankind through the medium of music, what would that message be? I had to ask myself this question while producing Fallen Man. How can I encourage, uplift, edify, and motivate my spiritual family members with the lyrical and musical components of this craft? Most importantly, will Yahweh be glorified? Will Yeshua be exalted? One of the major themes of this record revolves around the theological concept of the Day of the Lord, the highly prophesied day of when the Creator of the heavens and the earth will send His Son once again to this earth.
with power and glory, and with an enormous landmass that's referred to as the New Jerusalem. Fallen man wrestles with the reality of how dark this world can actually get when left in the hands of fallen men and spiritual adversaries. It toils with the idea of the importance of God's eternal commandments and speaks about our hope of resurrection glory, to one day be a new man, no longer stained by our previous fallen nature. Lighthouse was Adam and Eve introduced sin into the world, and their act removed our ability to walk around unrestricted. No need to worry though. Hanging on his words has got you covered. Literally. Find a link in the video description.